Hey, what's going on? So snow's starting to finally melt up here. We've been waiting for an opportunity to get the Cobra turned around in the garage so I could start messing around with the independent rear suspension on it. Not going to be doing that today, but you know, start thinking about different things, and I figured I'd make a fancy little introduction to the video. But in terms of the IRS, do a quick test fit with the mounting points of the IRS cradle and the torque boxes, and then while the IRS is out, I think it'll be a good time to start, you know, replacing and removing all the stock bushings and put that baller full tilt boogie racing kit in. But like I said, that'll be sometime in the future, not too far from now. Today it's gonna be back to the engine bay. So it's definitely been an interesting process so far, and I can honestly say I've been, you know, learning a lot along the way, especially with getting more comfortable with the metalwork and the welding and whatnot. First thing I did was I went back and did a lot more welding and grinding. I decided the only way I was going to be truly satisfied was to do as much of the work as I could in metal, and then not rely too much on, you know, body filler and fiberglass and whatever else, especially in the seams. Hopefully that will prevent any cracking or moisture or any type of issue down the road. There's literally so many ways you can do these panels in the engine bay. I pretty much picked the most tedious and time-consuming process, but I'm hoping in the end it'll be well worth the effort. Like I said, I won't be relying too much on the body fillers, and it'll basically be like a solid foundation of metal work underneath the paint. And so with that came a ton of shaping and grinding and praying that I don't burn through the thin gauge metal, but it worked out pretty nice, and it's just, you know, peace of mind that everything's solid, and I hopefully won't have any issues of, you know, cracking down the road. But that's not to say that's the only way to do this project. I've seen people do minimal welding and just throw tacks on here and there, and then just let the body filler and fiberglass do the rest. I've seen people skip the welding entirely and just use like 3M body panel adhesive and just clamp it into place and let it cure, and then proceed with the body filler. There's obviously pros and cons to doing it each way, whether it's, you know, cost of materials, time, durability, you know, stuff like that. Either way, it's just a matter of what you're comfortable with. You know, with welding all the seams, you're putting a lot of heat on thin sheet metal, so, you know, you gotta watch out for warping and excess heat, burning through, stuff like that. So if you're in the world of car modification, you know that things don't always go 100% to plan, and And this is a shrinking disc. It's an amazing tool. If you already know what a shrinking disc does, then you'll already know that I basically fucked up somewhere along the line. So basically, I tried to be super mindful of this because it is 22 gauge steel, but with the fender apron metal and the sheet metal being so thin, sometimes it's just really difficult to avoid. And when I was welding everything up, even with spreading out the heat, doing different sections over time, the flat part of the apron on the inner fenders basically started oil canning, which is just a symptom of excess heat. Like I said, I was trying to be as mindful as possible, moving around, but I guess, you know, somewhere down the line I got impatient and the metal started to heat up too much and started to oil can. So, but long story short, I ended up ordering that shrink disc online, and I had to wait about a week for it to get here, just because I couldn't find any locally, which kind of sucked, but it seemed like something worth trying. I'm nowhere near experienced enough to start playing around with torches, and I didn't want to make things worse. That was the biggest thing. So, you know, with the torch you can do a lot of damage, and you don't have a ton of control over the heat, which I was kind of worried about. But with a shrinking disc, and the shrinking disc is just stainless steel, it's nice and smooth and flat. So you're basically focusing the flat disc on the high spot of the metal and using the friction to create heat, and then you're cooling it down, and you're not generating as much heat as, say, like a torch would, and it's much more controlled because you control where the high spots are and what gets the most amount of heat. Basically just kind of keep at it, keep working on the high spots, let them cool down with a mist of water, and keep going until you've shrunk them all down. And it's actually really amazing and crazy how effective this little guy is. You know, it's a minor setback. It's obviously not ideal, but honestly, it's just another tool in the arsenal now. You know, you're always learning new things, and now you have another skill to use for down the road for any issues that arise. So doing stuff like this, you're always learning, and that is always a welcome thing in my book. So I might insert a clip here or maybe show it later on in the video, but I just filmed myself pushing on the fender apron. I just wanted to show how effective the disc was at basically getting the metal back into its previous form and state. So no matter where I pushed on the fender aprons, from the inside or the outside, there's absolutely no oil canning or popping in the metal anymore, and it's completely nice and flat, which is an amazing thing. So then I was basically going to start prepping the engine bay, but then I forgot all about this guy. The last little piece of BS that was waiting for me to fix before I could finally say that the metalwork and restoration phase on the engine bay is pretty much finished, which is huge. That makes me happy. So I basically started to cut this section out and welded in some new metal. So I'm going to go ahead and start stripping all the old paint out of the engine bay. I'm going to try and get it all down to pretty much bare metal, which is going to suck, but I basically want a clean slate to start with. And the main reason for that is just the paint in the engine bay is not the greatest. It's been flaking off in areas that I've been already working on, so the last thing I want to do is do all this work and put nice new paint over old crappy paint. So I'd rather be safe than sorry for sure. So stripping the engine bay is, it's not rocket science or anything, but there are ways and tools that you can use to make your life a lot easier. To do this, I'm just going to mainly use my angle grinder, my drill, an assortment of different discs and wire wheels and attachments, and then most definitely go back and do some areas by hand with just good old-fashioned sandpaper. Makes it really tedious, especially if you gotta sand through the sealer and the epoxy. So some of the attachments, one of my favorites to strip any paint or rust or anything off metal surface is this polycarbide abrasive disc. I've got one for a drill, I've got one for an angle grinder as well, and these are really good for just stripping paint off without taking any metal material with it. So they're relatively safe to use. The only drawback with these guys is they do wear out pretty quickly. They're really effective, but they wear out pretty quickly. This disc here is like $10, $12, so probably go through a couple of those if you rely on them too much. You also have your standard flap disc, but you gotta be careful with these just because they will take off the paint, but they'll also start taking off metal and material that you probably don't want it to take off. So wire wheels and brushes are a must, and these are, they come in an assortment of different sizes. You're gonna need a bunch of different sizes and shapes just to get into all the different areas. So here's where I'm at with the engine bay. Getting pretty close to having everything stripped down. There's a couple of tighter spots here and there that I have to go back and finish up, but for the most part it's it's getting there. I've got all the seams and edges all welded up where the frame rail sill meets the fender apron, and then where the fender apron meets the chassis of the body. So that's all welded up and ground down smooth. I welded up the seams where the front frame rail sills meet up with the brackets for the front core support. So that's all continuous and smooth. I did the same thing to the back of the frame rails as well. And like I mentioned before, the shrink disc took care of all the metal on the inner fenders. The slate warping and oil canning issue is all fixed. It's nice and smooth now. There's absolutely no popping back and forth. Everything is super tight. This has definitely taken me way longer than expected, but I'm super happy with the results. Stuff like this the end results are defined by, you know, all the prep work that you do. So I definitely want to take my time with this to basically get the end result that I want, right? Doing it this way basically just gives me peace of mind that everything is in there solid. And not only that, but just basically a solid foundation to do all your finishing and paint work on top. Like I said, I'm super happy with the way it's all coming out, and again, the fact that the restoration phase in Engine Bay is done and all the metal work is done is a huge step forward. All the issues one after the other, you know, that's all finally in the rear view. So hopefully the next time you see this thing, it'll be an epoxy primer, have some filler laid down, and you know, just keep on moving in the right direction. So I'm gonna leave it there, and I'll see you on the next one.